morning, guys. Today, with the commands of Christ, we have go to offenders and forgive offenders. And it's in Matthew chapter 18, same chapter as we were looking at, despise not the little ones. And there's forgiveness involved, and despise not the little ones. I guess Jesus foresaw Christian followers of Jesus, sinning against each other and making mistakes, offending each other. And, he says that when someone sins against you, that you're supposed to go to them and basically confront them about it. They sin against you, and then you go and you talk to them about it, and he encourages you to try to win them back. Help them to recognize that they wronged you, and he says to confront them. And if they don't want to make it right, you go and you get two other folks to come back with you, and if they still don't want to make it right, you go and get a big group, and if they still don't want to get it right, then you treat them as you would a pagan or a tax collector. So I was always taught in church that that's not good. Basically, if you treat somebody like a pagan or a tax collector, that was bad for you. That meant that we cut you off. That meant that we looked at you as completely lost and there's no hope for you. And, I'm not even going to talk to you. I won't even eat with you. And I think I was wrong. I think that mentality that I was using was incorrect. Because when you look at what Jesus says about forgiveness, it's way different. Now, of course, when, back then, I was in ministry school and I was studying to be a pastor and all that kind of stuff, and worked at a church. My whole thing was religion, and it was politics in the church. Not politics, but the whole thing is, hey, look, you're sinning. Now, if you look in ASV and some other versions, it closer to the Greek, closer to the original scriptures, it says if someone sins against you. Well, the versions I was reading said if someone sins. So, if someone sins, go and point out their fault. If someone sins. So what you had me doing was, you had me going to Sister Jones that, is doing whatever she's doing, and saying, hey, you can't be doing that. That's not right for you to do that. You can't, blah, 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 whatever it is. And of course she gets offended, and biblically, in my mind, I'm justified. Because, the Lord said if someone sins, go to them and tell them their fault. Tell them they're wrong and they need to repent. Guys, if someone sins against you, think about it like this. He's saying if someone sins, go and point their fault out, right? And then a few verses later, he talks about forgiving them. So if they're sinning, how are you going to forgive them for their sin? Makes no sense. If they sin against you, then you'd have room to forgive. But, man, I was so far away from the truth. My gosh. And we're talking about if you cause one of these little ones to stumble, and it'd be better for you to have a millstone tied around your neck and be drowned in the depths of the sea. And guys, I've made those mistakes. I have, made people stumble. Would it make you stumble if, you're minding your own business and somebody comes up to you and starts pointing a finger and telling you you're living in sin and you're going to go to hell if you don't get right? yes, that would mess you up a little bit. Believe me, it would mess you up. And that's wrong for a lot of reasons, but mainly when you look at Matthew chapter 7, Jesus clears the air early in your Christianity. Matthew 5, 6, and 7. In chapter 7, he says, "Judge not, that ye be not judged in the same measure, for the measure you use will be used against you." Another place, he says that if you're nice to people, and you're good to people, and you're forgiving, that will also be measured. How forgiving should we be, guys? How loving should we be? How compassionate? So I'm a failure on so many levels. And you look at go-to offenders. So now I see go-to offenders as if someone sins against me. Let's say I have somebody living at my house, and they take something from me. Okay? I have what now? So I go to them and I tell them, hey, you can't take like that. That's not right. You can't do that. That's what he's talking about. He's saying if somebody sins against you, go to them and tell them that. But you try to win them back. Try to talk about what it is that caused that. And he challenges you to forgive them. He tells you a parable of the unforgiving servant where a king is looking through all his debts to see who owes him money. And you got this guy that owes him, insurmountable. We could use as an example, say millions of dollars he owes him that he's loaned him. And he wants it back. So he calls a guy in there to collect it. The guy doesn't have it. So he's getting ready to throw him into prison. And the guy drops down on his knees and begs for mercy. Just give me some time and I will pay it back. Guys, he couldn't pay back that debt in 10 lifetimes. Okay? Couldn't be paid back. King says, don't even worry about it. Soon as this man, and he's so grateful and so happy and so relieved. 5 minutes later, he gets out, walking down the hall, and he meets a man who owes him some money. And he starts choking him, saying, pay me what you owe me. The guy couldn't pay him. Now, keep in mind, this is a fraction of what he owed the king. Pennies compared to what his debt was. And he chokes the guy and throws him in jail till he could pay it all back. Well, that's not right. The other servants heard that. They went and told the king. And when the king heard that, he had the man called back in there. And he told him, I had mercy on you. I had mercy on you. Shouldn't you have had mercy on your fellow servant? He ordered him to be locked up and tortured until he could pay every cent back. And he said, this is how my Father in heaven will treat you if you don't forgive your brothers and sisters from your heart. Guys, do you have any idea how heavy that weighs on me? How many mistakes I made? How many flaws I have? How many times I've screwed up? And, the whole thing is, we go to them, we tell them they sin against us, not themselves. If people are sinning against themselves, leave them alone. If they're sinning against you, then you have the right to go to them and tell them, hey, you shouldn't have done this. But he tells you too that you have the right to forgive them. That you have every single right to forgive them. And nobody can stop you. Forgive them, guys. Look how much we're forgiven for. Look how often we need forgiveness. And Peter was being generous when he offered his brother forgiveness 7 times. And Jesus said 70 times 7. In other words, how many times has Christ forgiven Sean Kaiser? I don't think it can be counted. I just don't. So if he can be that forgiving to me, how forgiving do I need to be to my brothers and sisters? So today's command is go to offenders and forgive offenders, guys. It's a wonderful, beautiful thing, and man, I wish you the best of luck and blessing in this thing, and we thank you for watching, and we'll talk at you guys later and see you next time.